All right, Shalom. All praise to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah, Quadash, double honor to the elders at Great Millstone who taught us this truth. Shalom to the hopefully elect. All right, I want to play this video by the brother Arrows of Indignation 144. All right, this is titled "Listen Up." Okay, ICE, no warrant needed for ICE to come into your home. All right, or to enter your home. All right. So we're gonna let this play. All right. Like the brother has, the fair use disclaimer. All right. So we're not making any money off of this. This is just for for edification. All right. To link current events with Bible prophecy. All right, and to warn the hopefully elect of our people. All right, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. All right, who make up the 12 tribes of Israel. All right, as well as those that have been scattered abroad. All right, but are of the seed of Jacob. All right. Anyways, let's let this play, and we're gonna get these scriptures. Come on, man.
Started telling Frontline about ICE, but wait till you... We've been warning you for months about ICE, but wait till you hear this. Back in May, the ICE attorneys started telling Frontline officers that they don't need a judicial warrant to enter someone's home to arrest them, despite the fact that the Fourth Amendment clearly requires a judicial warrant, a warrant signed by a neutral judge to say, yes, you have probable cause and you can go into that person's house to grab someone. They say that their BS administrative warrants allow them to bust into people's houses and to drag them out into the cold like we just saw in Minnesota. I can't tell you how illegal this is. I can't tell you how contrary to the Constitution this is. You all need to wake up and pay attention to what they're doing, because if they can do this to immigrants, they can do it to any of us.
ICE agent. Yeah, there's Esau showing his true colors. I'm just making a little comment, but these Edomites, they don't care when it happens to Jake, to so-called Hispanics, who are Israelites. All right, they say, or he's saying, oh, it can happen to us too. Now it can happen to Edomites. That's why there's such a big uprising. All right, about these two Edomites that got shot up. All right.
Are being instructed by a new policy to force their way into American homes even without a judicial warrant. The next stage may have begun. This is going to be a slightly longer video, but I need you to listen to me. This is the document I'm talking about. It says that an internal memo from May 2025 from DHS and ICE authorizes ICE agents to enter American homes without consent, exigent circumstances, or a judicial warrant, which is the basic standard for the Fourth Amendment. The memo authorizes agents to use whatever force is necessary to enter a home with just an administrative warrant. The memo contains only two limits to these sweeping new powers, and those are the entering of third-party homes, which cannot be accessed using force, and the need for an I-205, which is an administrative warrant that contains a final order of removal. What does that mean? That if the content of the memo is confirmed, the government would be now openly violating the Fourth Amendment rights by allowing federal agents to force their way into a home based on an order issued by the same agency that employs those federal agents. And I'm preparing a Substack deep dive that explains more in detail the content of the memo, the constitutional implications, and how this policy ignores almost 100 years of Supreme Court decisions. But I want to point out two things that I think are very important in this video. Number one, this memo was addressed to all ICE personnel, but for some reason was not distributed and was only briefly shown to individuals who then trained their agency on this policy. Why is that? Well, in my opinion, because no documentation means plausible deniability and avoids something that can become a discoverable record in any future litigation. The federal government knew that this memo was a constitutional liability, in my opinion, but wanted to apply it first and minimize the fallout later. Number two, this policy is being deployed in the Fifth Circuit only, and this to me is very, very important because this is the court system that includes Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and it's a federal court system that is notoriously tolerant of heavy-handed law enforcement tactics. I suspect...
Yeah, you hear that? That's important. He said it's only in that Fifth Circuit. Let's go back and hear that again. So it's not necessarily nationwide, all right, according to this, but we know where this is heading, all right, because prophecy tells us about martial law, all right, and we're going to get that in a second, all right.
Documentation means plausible deniability and avoids something that can become a discoverable record in any future litigation. The federal government knew that this memo was a constitutional liability, in my opinion, but wanted to apply it first and minimize the fallout later. Number two, this policy is being deployed in the Fifth Circuit only, and this to me is very, very...
All right, so there you go, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, all right. So that's where they want to deploy this this violation of the Fourth Amendment, all right, which They don't care about the Constitution anyway. All right. I believe it was George W. Bush, I believe, who said, it's just a goddamn piece of paper. All right. Talking about the Constitution. Okay. And then you had Obama, that Hamite. Okay. Because he's not an Israelite. He's not a so-called black man. He's a so-called African man. All right. There's a difference. All right. But nevertheless, he said, the Constitution is like just a piece of paper and we make it mean something. I think he said something to that effect. I don't want to, misquote the man, but, basically, the government tells you, this is just a piece of paper, and it really is. They say it has meaning, but they don't abide by those rules. So what's the point, Let me actually get a scripture about that. Let's see. See, unrighteous decrees. Let's see. Isaiah 10:1, it says, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed." All right, that's these devils, man. These Edomites, particularly in this time. All right, they they write these unrighteous decrees, these unrighteous laws. All right, they say that they're not gonna violate the sanctity of your home. They say they're not gonna harass people and wrongfully detain people. All right, but then they go ahead and pass a law or a rule or whatever saying that they can do it. All right, it shows you that that these devils, all right, they have a forked tongue. All right, they're the serpent. Okay, they're deceptive. All right, they're natural born liars. All right.
Important because this is the court system that includes Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and it's a federal court system that is notoriously tolerant of heavy-handed law enforcement tactics. I suspect the plan here is for the government to try to get a couple of favorable decisions as people take the federal government to court after their front door gets broken down.
An internal Immigration and Customs Enforcement memo obtained by the Associated Press shows ICE officials told officers and agents they can forcibly enter homes of people subject to deportation without warrants signed by judges. Now, the memo from acting ICE Director Todd Lyons, shared by whistleblowers with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, is dated May 12th. It authorizes agents to forcibly enter homes using only an administrative warrant instead of a warrant from a judge when a person has a final order of removal. This reflects, of course, a major departure from the longstanding practice of requiring judge-signed warrants to enter homes. It also is a clear Fourth Amendment violation. What do you make of this memo, and is it a violation of the law?
Yeah, Mika, good morning. This is incredible and important reporting by the AP's Rebecca Santana. And she says in the story that the AP doesn't really know, no one knows to what extent they've actually used this memo and acted on this memo, but they documented at least one case where they said they saw ICE officers break into the home of a Liberian immigrant and drag him out, and then they later learned that that was based only on an administrative warrant. Look, let's be real here. MAGA Republicans and many Donald Trump supporters are angry and annoyed that there are so many people running around the United States who have final orders of removal. Illegal immigrants in the country illegally who should be deported, and ICE is trying to find them, and they can't find them, and it's a really difficult administrative problem, and it's existed for years. But that doesn't trump the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. No matter whether they have an order of removal and administrative warrant, the Fourth Amendment applies to all persons in the United States, not just American citizens. And there's a long litany of Supreme Court decisions and other case law that suggests that the Fourth Amendment applies in all of these contexts. There's no such thing as an administrative warrant that allows law enforcement officers to break into a home without approval of a judge because people are supposed to be secure in their persons and papers. That's a fundamental precept of the Constitution. And the other really telling thing about the story, you alluded to this, is that she reports that the memo is not in wide circulation. In fact, the security around it is really telling. They're not letting people keep copies of it. They're letting people read it and then they're taking it back. And somehow these whistleblowers managed to obtain a copy and slip it to a senator.
Yeah, there you go. They're trying to keep this thing, hush hush. They're trying to, kind of get the word out among their, organization, among the agency, right? But they're also trying to, keep it hush hush, trying to cover their tracks, because they know that this is, this is a no-no, this is against what they claim to be about. All right. And Isaiah the 19th chapter tells you that there's going to be, You know, if you can receive it, civil war in America. All right, this Egypt here, all right, it's talking about America. Isaiah 19:2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, the Americans against the Americans. All right, particularly, you're going to see what? These Edomites against these Edomites. All right, you're already seeing these so-called white people, all right, at each other's throats over this whole ICE thing. All right. And they shall fight everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. All right. And you're also going to have Trump's Gestapo, you know, or really the international banking family, banking families, their Gestapo, all right, which is the ICE troops, all right, as well as any other, you know, troops, because they own the government, you know. So let's also get Zechariah 14 and 2. It says, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, all right, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, okay, and the women ravished, all right. The houses are getting rifled. People are running up. They're running up into people's houses now, all right. And the women ravished, and that's going to come in these days, all right. Women are going to be getting, it's going to be a lot of graping out here, all right. A lot of grape, okay. You're picking up what I'm putting down. It's going to be that going on, all right. In these times to come, Jacob's trouble, all right. And half of the city shall go forth into captivity. What's that talking about? That's talking about, that's a poetic way of saying, it's not literally half. It's a poetic way of saying a portion of the people will go into captivity in what? In these FEMA camps that they have built, okay? Which really a lot of these like Walmarts and stuff like that is, you know, just a FEMA camp is like 1 or 2 days away from being made into a FEMA camp. You know what I mean? They would just have to rearrange stuff and, you know, set things up in a certain way. But that facility is already, you know, outfitted, you know what I'm saying, to become a FEMA camp, you know? And the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city, okay? And we know in 2nd Ezra's, right? 2nd Ezra's 16, and we'll jump all the way down to verse 68. It says, for behold, the burning wrath of a great multitude is kindled over you, okay? And we're seeing that right now, all right? These Edomites, okay? And it's only going to pick up and escalate from here, all right? You see how they were targeting the Northern Kingdom? All right, there was a little like week or two where they were targeting the so-called Haitians, all right, up in New York, right? You know, but it's all going to escalate against the 12 tribes of Israel, all right? Which are the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, okay? And they shall take away certain of you and feed you, being idle with things offered unto idols. So IDLE, meaning unable to move, all right? You're going to be locked up, okay? And then the things offered unto idols are what? The New World Order, you know, the microchip, okay? And they that consent unto them shall be had in derision and in reproach and trodden under foot. You know, you get with their program, you try and be one of their, you know, stormtroopers, they're going to use you and throw you to the curb, all right? For there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, all right? Ultimately, that's the elect at this time, but also all of Israel. This is really talking about all of Israel, okay? All the Israelites, all right? Because, why? Because we naturally have a fear of the Most High, all right? Romans, the 2nd chapter, goes into how the Gentiles, the Israelite foreigners, right? They have the law within themselves, roughly paraphrasing. You know, it's kind of within their mind to naturally keep certain things within the law, you know, and how it's a law unto themselves. That's what the Apostle Paul said, you know, roughly paraphrasing, you know. So those that fear the Lord, yeah, who really fears the Lord is the hopefully elect, but really it's all Israel, you know, is going to be targeted here, okay? Verse 72, for they shall waste and take away their goods and cast them out of their houses, all right? And you're seeing people get cast out of their houses by these ICE agents, all right? Verse 73, then shall they be known who are my chosen, who are the elect, right? You're going to know because all the prophecies that they've been prophesying are coming to pass, all right? And then also some of them are even going to get spiritual power. So you're going to have to know, that a man is a chosen one. If you see him flying, you know, you see him bullets bouncing off of him, you know, and he's not hurt, you know. And they shall be tried as the gold in the fire. Hear, O ye my beloved, saith the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Behold, the days of trouble are at hand, but I will deliver you from the same. That's comforting, man. That's very beautiful for us to hear. You know, the Lord is going to be with us and deliver us. You know, Lord's will, we're the elect. All right. Let's see. Verse 75. Be ye not afraid, neither doubt, for the Most High is your guide, and the guide of them who keep my commandments and precepts, saith the Lord power. Let not your sins weigh you down, and let not your iniquities lift up themselves. All right. So, yeah, you know, they're coming, man. All right. They're coming with these draconian measures. Let's actually get that. All right. Spake as a dragon. All right. Revelation 13:11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So what's the 2 horns? That's the Democrat and the Republican system. Okay, and what's the dragon? That's going into what? Draconian. All right, that's what that word goes into. Let's see, Dracon. All right, that's that word. A dragon, a great serpent, a name for Satan. All right, but it goes back to a draconian legislation, which what's draconian, you know, in this instance is, you know, just giving these stormtroopers, you know what I'm saying, free reign to kick in your door and just take you, you know, without that signature from a third party, you know what I'm saying, judge, you know. But hey, you know, I pray that was edifying. You know, I want to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah, Quadash, double honor to the elders at Great Millstone who taught us this truth. Shalom to the hopefully elect. Shalom.